Hello. I didn't see you there. I was just reading my textbook. My name is Alu Parata, the Alu Parata, first class historian. Now I bet you may be wondering what I was reading. Well, my friends, this was a chapter on Coxey's army. A mighty fine read, if I must say so myself. Now you're probably wondering, what is Coxey's army? Well, that is a swell question. See, I could tell you the tale myself, but I think it may be most beneficial to have the man himself, John Coxey, come in and tell you the tale himself.
Hello, John. It's wonderful to have you here today.
It is wonderful to be here, Alu.
So, John, tell us a little bit about the night when you envisioned the plan for Coxey's army.
Well, it was a cold, rainy December night. I was driving home in my buggy with my team to Massillon, Ohio. While I was driving, I could not help but ponder about the high unemployment rate in our country, while simultaneously trying to avoid potholes. The occurrences of both events sparked an idea in my mind. Why not hire the unemployed to fix the potholes?
Well, John, that was quite the plan. But what did you think the plan could accomplish and how?
Well, Alu, the idea just seemed so simple and beneficial. We could get funding from the federal government to provide for the wages for those willing to work. The federal government could also loan money to local governments in exchange for long-term, non-interest-bearing bonds, and in turn the local government could hire people to build playgrounds, roads, schools, hospitals, and any other local needs. This plan seemed great to me because, as a result, more money would be put into circulation. It would restore dignity to unemployed, provide them with a source of income. This would also be beneficial due to the fact that we were in a time of tight money and economic depression. Since the government was essentially employing the people, they could ensure that they were given fair wages and that there was a set 8-hour workday. I believe with this newfound competition, private employers would also be forced to meet the same standards or risk losing their employees. And in the grand scheme of things, the potholes would be fixed, so I would no longer have to try so desperately to avoid them. Hundreds of more workers joined as they were marching to Washington. There were 500 men participating in the march. After demanding the government to immediately assist workers by hiring them for public projects, Congress and President Grover Cleveland refused. I was then arrested by law enforcement for trespassing on public property. The army then split up due to the arrest of their leader. I was then released from jail and returned to Ohio.
Wow, that is quite the plan. So how exactly did you plan to get the government to recognize it and not just brush it aside with the hundreds of other requests and complaints to get daily?
Well, my plan was to make sure that the government could not ignore this, so I wanted to make sure that it was public and loud. I seek to collaborate with an unlikely companion, Carl Brown, who, as we like to call him, Old Greasy. Carl was everything the opposite of me. He was a big, burly, loud fellow who always seemed to be dressed in some form of exaggerated Western attire, and this man was completely opposed to bathing, which occasionally made it hard to work with him. But we made a good team. We balanced each other out, and whatever the weaknesses of one of us were, was the strength of another. So Carl and I drafted 2 measures that we intended to present to Congress, which outlined our plan. The first was called Good Roads Bill, and the other Non-Interest-Bearing Bond Bill. We wanted to petition Congress on behalf of the powerless, and in order to ensure that our petition would not be thrown in the pile with countless others, we planned to make sure it stood out and it was powerful. So we had planned to at least have 1,000 angry unemployed Americans marching to Washington, D.C. to deliver a plea in person. This would be big and loud and ensure that we were not ignored.
Wow, that was quite the bold plan. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today and for telling us all about your plan.
No problem.
Now that was quite the bold plan, wasn't it? It really had the potential to work out. In fact, many people believed that it would. On the days preceding the event, Coxey and Brown stirred up so much commotion that the government was on edge. On the day of the march, March 25th, 1894, reporters from all around the nation gathered in Massillon to capture the supposedly great event and await the 100,000 marchers. However, the marchers only numbered close to 100. The number of reporters outnumbered the number of marchers. The government was able to breathe a sigh of relief because they did not need to combat 100,000 angry workers. Of the 100 workers who did show up was an entertaining assortment of people, including Oklahoma Sam, a cowboy with an amazing repertoire of riding and roping tricks, and Douglas McCullum, author of the books Dogs and Fleas by One of the Dogs. The cover of the march became a sort of comedic story. Papers would tell the tales of the latest antics of the army every day. For 5 weeks, the media covered Coxey and his army of unemployed workers marching towards the nation's capital. After demanding the government to immediately assist workers by hiring them for public projects, Congress and President Cleveland Grover refused. Coxey was then arrested by law enforcement for trespassing on public property. After the arrest of their leaders, the army split up. Days later, Coxey was released from jail and returned to Ohio.